Welcome to our webinar, Better Detection, Better Response, how XDR technology expands your options and capabilities when faced with a cyber attack. Well, before we start, we do have a couple of housekeeping items to review. Pretty standard here today, but everyone is muted, so there's no background noise. There's a Q&A window that's also available for use for any questions or comments you may have. We are moderating that here today. In addition to introducing our guests, I'll also serve as that moderator. Looks like we are joined also by our marketing coordinator, Courtney Hicks, and our director of technology, Jonathan Hasse. There'll be time available after the webinar to ask questions, whether answer them during the webinar or set up a time to answer your specific questions. Contact information will also be provided at the end of the webinar for you to get in touch with us at LammTech. In addition to our live webinar, we'll provide a link to the recording should you want to review what you learned today or just want to share your knowledge with another person in your organization, or even want to show someone that you may refer LammTech to. Without further housekeeping items, let's get officially started. For those that are just joining us, again, good morning. I'm Doug Sokolowski, the account manager for LammTech. We welcome you and thank you for your time on today's webinar. For those that are unfamiliar, LammTech aligns IT solutions with your growth initiatives. Our goal overall is to take care of your technology so that you can focus on your day-to-day business and stop expanding your problems. Now, LammTech does offer managed services to maintain your security, such as what you see on the screen. We maintain that security, your help desk support, consulting, and also data recovery along with backup services. Today's overall theme, we'll be talking about how properly protecting your collaboration tools goes beyond what they provide, and how extra protection can make all that difference, especially when cyber attack does occur. We're happy to bring back one of our guests from the past, Brandon Kirkpatrick, who is the sales manager with Trend Micro. And we get the opportunity to hear about the diverse background, not only cybersecurity, but in IT infrastructure and solutions. So without further ado, let's bring in Brandon. Good morning, Brandon. How are you today?
Good morning, Doug. Doing well.
Good. Well, we're ready to learn some more things. Good to have you back here today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you very much. So I will go ahead and get my presentation set up here and share my screen out. If you guys could confirm with me when you could see it, and then we'll get started. And screen 2 and share. Okay, can you guys see me?
I see that now.
All right, fantastic. Cool. So again, thank you very much for inviting me here. This is a subject that I love to talk about, specifically XDR. To really understand and get what I mean by better detections and better responses and what XDR does, it really gets at the core of cybersecurity and the process in general and how you approach it as an organization. It's a very holistic topic by design, and what you'll see why here in a minute. But really, when I was putting this presentation together, I wanted to answer a very simple question, and that is, what is XDR and why do I need it? You often hear new technology terms come up, new acronyms, variations on those acronyms. Sometimes it's difficult to really sort out what is just kind of hype and what is actual real usable technology that's going to mean something to you. And in the case of XDR, it truly is the latter. And we'll go through the whole process of what XDR does, how it gathers that information. But let's talk about what that X and XDR stands for. So the DR stands for detection and response, right? Really the cybersecurity process. Hey, we see something that's dangerous. Let's respond to that in kind, okay? And the X here, I've heard it actually termed in different ways. I've seen it mean extended detection and response. You may have also heard of EDR, which is like endpoint detection and response. But really, I think the most apt description of XDR here is going to be X, meaning cross-platform detection and response. The crux there being cross-platform. I need multiple platforms reporting to a single place so I can correlate events between all this. So the idea here is like the endpoint sensor and the email sensor combined together in a single data lake gives me complete visibility across both platforms. So when an incident arises that originated in email but was able to execute on a computer, then I have that cross-platform detection response, and I see a more complete alert. Okay? Sounds complicated. It's not. When I show you an actual XDR event, that will make sense. Okay? We do this for more complete visibility. Seems kind of obvious, but we want to see what's going on in multiple areas. And again, when we respond to these things, we want to respond in multiple platforms as well. This gives us all the visibility across both those platforms. Okay? Kind of innate in that is the correlation of events. Okay? If I see one event on one machine and I see the same event on another, and then, oh, by the way, I see that happen 6 more times throughout the rest of the network, correlating those together is very, very important. We don't want to handle those incidents as individual things that happen. We want to handle them as a group of events. So when we correlate, again, we're combining multiple data sources, multiple endpoints, multiple pieces of email metadata, right? And we're able to correlate those and respond to them as a group of log entries, not just deal with them one at a time. Okay? And this is all for the purpose of root cause analysis. Root cause analysis is just what it says, right? Finding out what the root cause of this situation is. Okay? You get ransomware on your machine. Ransomware is not the cause. Ransomware was the effect, right? We want to know where it came from. How did it actually make its way onto that machine? And that's going to inform how we respond and how we make sure that it doesn't happen on other machines. Root cause analysis is why if you go to a cybersecurity insurance vendor today and you ask them for a policy, they're going to turn around and say, cool, do you have EDR? Do you have XDR? Because they want you to perform an effective root cause analysis when you're infected. So you get ransomware, you actually are able to eradicate that. They help you recover your data. They want to ensure you're just not immediately reinfected by the same entity with the same incident, right? To do that, you really have to find out where it came from and respond appropriately. All right, last item here is actionable intelligence. This is gathering intelligence from these events that we can actually use, right? Not just virus total information. That stuff can be helpful. You know, in-depth threat reports, that can be helpful. But actionable intelligence is, hey, this threat originated on email. And John in accounting opened up this email, right? And in that contained our infection. There's a couple of things that we have that's actionable intelligence. We know where that email came from. We know that John might open up phishing emails, and we can have conversations with him about how better practices on opening emails and the identification of potentially malicious email. There's a lot of elements within an XDR detection that we can actually take action on. Right? And that's really what we're after. And this is all powered by indiscriminate collection of data. This is a term that I use. I don't know if it's an industry term, but it's indiscriminate, meaning that what the sensor actually gathers, it doesn't care whether or not it's a part of a detection, or we would say, hey, this is an actual threat. It's just going to gather this data anyway. And we'll look at what data it's gathering. But the idea is when you have an infection, when you have a detection, and then you identify, oh, hey, this might be related. When I'm searching for that thing that might be related, I'm seeing a complete list of all interactions that thing may have. And when I say that thing, I mean an IP address, a file hash, a URL, a domain. Because I've been gathering indiscriminate data at all times and just dumping it into this data lake, when I do that search, I'm seeing a complete picture, right? We have that complete visibility, right? And then I can correlate that on multiple events. Okay, so yeah, let's look at what actually drives this. What is this indiscriminate data that we're gathering? Okay. And that's the next slide here. What drives XDR? So for the purposes of today's discussion, we're going to look at 2 platforms that we're going to do XDR with. Essentially the email platform and the endpoint platform. Probably the simplest form of XDR that can be accomplished. So that's going to start with the endpoint sensor. And there's several pieces of data that we're going to gather. We're going to gather processes. What's actually running in Task Manager? All those smss.exe, all the Chrome processes. Not only what process is running, but what process spawned that process. You know, Why is that service running? It was executed by another process in there, right? All that's process data that's going to feed in as telemetry. Executed commands, what's done in the command prompt? Did somebody launch CMD and type in ipconfig, /all? That's technically telemetry data, and that would show up in this indiscriminate data that we're gathering. Network connections, what IP addresses, what URLs, what domains are you having conversations with? Right? Every time a file is created or modified or retrieved, the file hash is recorded as telemetry. Right? Registry information, every time a registry is edited, every time it's modified, every time a key is added, every time a key is deleted, all that stuff, again, is telemetry. And you look at this and it seems like a lot, but the actual data footprint is not that much, right? And this data is completely unreadable to just looking at it on the screen. That's why it's dumping into this data lake where there's analysis being done, there's correlation being done, there's behavioral models that are applied, there's, implications of the MITRE ATT&CK framework. That we're looking at all of that data, and we're going to automatically correlate and spit out alerts based on that. Okay. What's also included here is email sensor data. Okay. So message metadata for both external and internal emails, right? So all the data from all the emails that's flowing in, all of the metadata associated, the sender IP, the envelope address, attachment metadata, all the file features, everything about the attachment. How big is it? What was the file extension? Did the file extension match the true file type? All of that's metadata that's going to be gathered. External links that are present. Is there a link in that email? Did that link take us somewhere dangerous, right? Is there links in the attachment, right? Also, user activity, like where are they logging in from? Is the user logging in every day from Birmingham, Alabama, and then all of a sudden they log in from China? That's type of information that's tied in with email metadata as well. So we're gathering those two independent sources of data, those sensor data, and those are actually driven together to drop directly into our XDR data lake. And the XDR data lake is just compiling all of this together. And again, behavioral models, correlation, detections, all that stuff is going to sit in the XDR data lake. Cool. So this next slide here is simply the National Institute of Standards and Technology incident response cycle. Okay, because this is I like really simple diagrams to explain things, but this kind of shows the whole process of cybersecurity in 4 steps here. Okay, so how this is relevant to XDR is actually relevant at every single step here. Okay, in preparation, here, this is when we're enabling the XDR sensors, when we're making sure that it's fully deployed, we're getting accurate sensor data, and all that stuff. Okay? The next step there, detection and analysis, because we have all that XDR sensor data, our detections are a lot more sophisticated. And I'll give you an example. If I am running antivirus on a machine and I get a piece of malware, I get an alert that says, hey, we found malware. It's in your downloads directory. And my response to that may be like, okay, where did it come from? I'm not sure. I'm not sure how it got on there. I don't know how it executed. I might take a response action there in the containment and eradication and recovery step. I might take a response there to just basically, I might reformat that machine, right? Just reformat, just blank it out. We've got a company image. We'll just make sure that nothing latent is left on there by zeroing out the hard drive and starting all over, right? That was our effort of containment, eradication, and recovery. Right, and then my post-incident activity in that case might be, well, I hope that doesn't happen again. I'm not sure where it came from, but I just hope that it doesn't happen again. Right, XDR helps this process a lot because our detection analysis phase is a lot more detailed. Right, I have malware on this machine, and this is the path. Oh, by the way, here's the original process that actually spawned from it, and that actually came from this zip file, and that zip file was actually an attachment in this email. And the person who sent that email is this. And also, here's some other people in the organization that might have the same email. And you can see with all of that intelligence, our containment, eradication, and recovery steps are a lot more sophisticated. I can block that sender. I can quarantine that message in multiple mailboxes. I can go ahead and pull that message out and ensure that they don't suffer the same fate that I saw on this machine. right? I can identify that zip file. I can identify the hash value. I can start taking action against that, make that the threat, right? The originating process, I can blacklist that process, right? I know the threat came in over email, so I can take efforts to do maybe, phishing awareness with my users, just based on something we observed within the environment. So all of these steps get a lot more sophisticated when you have XDR sensor data, not just, a real-time scan, predictive machine learning, behavior modeling. All that stuff is crucial, but having that indiscriminate telemetry data alongside of it just gives you so much more power when you actually identify a threat to ensure that it's fully eradicated from the environment. And then our post-incident activity. If we record a security incident, right? If you do the actual incident response from NIST, a lot of smaller organizations don't, but if you actually do an incident report and you have to fill it out and provide as much information, obviously the sensor data and all those keys that we talked about, that's going to provide a more complete post-incident activity. And that's going to, help you prepare for the next time this happens, and then the process starts all over again. Okay. So I want to run through the anatomy of a ransomware attack, just to talk to you, because one of the components here with XDR is the identification of a threat before it becomes an actual problem. The reason I chose ransomware here is I have conversations every day with people that talk about ransomware, and they say, maybe not the same words, right? But they say everything was going fine, everything was working great, then all of a sudden, boom, one day we got ransomware. And it can feel like that. But the reality is, most of the time, there is a dwell period. And sometimes this dwell period is up to 90 days. And what a dwell period means, between the initial access and the actual execution of ransomware, time spent by an attacker, either an entity or an individual, in your environment executing this ransomware. Right? When you actually see the results of it and you see ransomware has ran, my files are encrypted, and I've got this ransom note to deal with, the whole phase is already done. They may have been in your network for a long time. Okay? And the reason this is important with XDR is looking at, hey, odd behaviors that happen on multiple machines. Hey, we noticed this user actually scanned ports of every single endpoint within your environment. That's kind of weird. And at the same time, we saw him talk to this IP address that's a known command and control server. We can see all that in the early phases of an attack, and that helps hopefully identify this before actually ransomware is even executed. Most of the time, if you could spot attacker behavior within your environment and you can take a mitigation or an eradication step, if me as an attacker, if I see that someone actually knows that I'm there and is taking a response against me, I'm going to leave. I'm just going to go find someone else that's not paying attention. That's more trouble than it's worth. Cybersecurity or cyber criminals are cyber criminals inherently because they're lazy. They want quick and easy money, right? And this affords them that. So let's go through the steps of where we might be able to spot this activity happen, and where XDR might be able to actually see this happen, and then we could stop it before we get to the last phase there, right? So the first phase is delivery. How am I going to break in? I would say 90% of the time, this is a phishing email. I send a phishing email out to a bunch of organizations. Somebody clicks on it. They give me basically my initial access. Either I install something on the machine that allows me to remote in, or I gain credentials. There's lots of different ways, but let's go ahead and do the break-in, right? And that can be spotted with behavioral stuff with XDR here, right? And then you have command and control. So I've broken into this machine, and now I want to just be able to access the machine anytime I want to. So do you see something appear in the startup item? So after a reboot, this executable will automatically launch and connect to my command and control server, so I can get access to that machine even after it reboots. So that's like the second phase. I want to be able to access this machine anytime I want to, right? So I can get more credentials, right? I was able to compromise maybe this user's credentials, but I want to maybe run Mimikatz or some kind of, credential mining effort elsewhere as well. And I want to see if I can get more credentials. Or can I escalate the privileges of what I've already stolen? Can I turn this user then to a power user? And then using that power user credentials, can I elevate that to administrative credentials, right? That's what's happening here in this phase, right? And then once I have all the access that I need, then I do my canvassing, or this was also known as discovery. I want to find out where your file server is. That data looks sensitive. Okay, can I identify maybe what your backup system is and what the target for those backups is? All right, if I can see all of that, then when I execute my ransomware, I can make it really, really hurt to where you don't have backups and you don't have a viable way to recovery without my recovery. All right, so that's what the canvas phase in. Where is this going to actually hurt? Once they have all this information, they have the appropriate credentials, they have access anytime they want to, they know where ransomware is going to hurt the worst, then they pull off the extortion. And the goal there is obviously to ruin your day. They want you to pay them money to get your data back. Right? So at all these phases, there's all these things that happen, right? The delivery phase is a phishing email that gets sent. Can we spot that? Right? There's several technologies we have in place to spot that, but if we can see that activity and give you an XDR alert right then, all the better, right? Stop it in phase one. Command and control, they're running a command and control service usually on a machine. That's network telemetry. We can spot that with XDR, right? Credential access, odd behavior. Why would this user all of a sudden go to a power user, right? Canvassing. Why is this one endpoint checking the shares of every single other endpoint in the company? That's odd, right? No malware is involved so far. Right? We haven't seen any malicious software here. It's behavior, it's odd things, it's weird things that people do that aren't in line with normal user behavior. And then the extortion, obviously. I hope we can see that. We can identify the ransomware. We have behavior monitoring there to shut that process down, even if it's a new or a 0-day threat that we don't. We use behavior monitoring to say, hey, I see an unauthorized encryption action. Let's actually shut that process down and restore any files that it may have changed. But the point here is that at any of these layers, we have the ability to spot attacker activity and stop it in its tracks before it's an actual security incident. Okay, so I hope this was clear about what we're doing with XDR, how it goes above and beyond just normal antivirus and the identification of threats. We take that further with indiscriminate data being gathered at all times. So when we have a detection, we have a lot of intelligence to work off of. So with that, I'd like to look at some XDR tools from Trend Micro and show you an actual XDR alert. I'm not going to show you an obscenely complicated one. I want to keep this simple, but I want you to understand that all these are actual. XDR is a real tool with real results that cybersecurity professionals and consultants and everybody is benefiting from in a significant way. Cool, so let's do that. All right, so I'm within worry-free right here. And if you might have worry-free services, and you might not have these detection and response tools, but this is what gets added with when you go to worry-free services XDR, for instance. Okay, it adds these detection and response tools. Within my policy, you'll see that I also have the endpoint sensor turned on. All right, that's what also gets added when we upgrade to XDR here. Okay. And then in addition to that, if I look at the dashboard, Cloud App Security is up here at the top too. This is what's facilitating the connection to email. It's talking to my Exchange Online database. And all of the messages and files and all the email metadata and everything like that is being dumped in the data lake here within Worry-Free. So that's where my email sensors and my endpoint sensors are coming from, dropping into a data lake. And then I use these detection and response tools to work with that data lake. Okay. Noteworthy events here, automatically generated. We notice something strange. Here's the relevant file hashes. Here's the task. Here's the actual process list that played out. Here's the forensic analysis. And then we could do several response actions directly from this alert. So let me see this iCard. Is this one we want? Yeah, this is going to work right here. So again, very simple here. I'm not going to show you a long, complicated process chain. I think that would be boring for me and you. But we have iCard.com here. Okay, this is a test virus, but without XDR running, this is what our detection looks like. Hey guys, we found something. It's a known malicious file. And here's the file path. And here's the file hash. And here's what we did in response. We attempted to clean it, couldn't do that, but we were able to quarantine it. And you're kind of left going, that's great. Looks like my antivirus did its job. But what's not clear with just that information is where this came from, how it executed, what actually happened on the endpoint, And is this now just going to happen on another machine? I have a ton of questions. How do I make sure this is contained, eradicated, isolated, all that good stuff? Right. So if we were seeing this right here, and this was something particularly dangerous, we look at virus total, we find out, oh, that's like maybe a Cobalt Strike initiator, or it's like a ransomware initiator, right? We might isolate the endpoint instantly. Okay. This is bad news. We want to make sure it doesn't spread to other machines. So we simply isolate the endpoint here. Okay. Now we also know that it came from this zip file, a very obviously named beta test virus zip file. Obviously, in the real world, it's not going to be that obvious, but compressed file here containing no malware. I can choose now to block that object. And so that's going to look for this file hash on any other machine that's enabled with this XDR sensor. Okay. If we see you interacting with that file hash, we're going to generate an alert, and we're going to shut down whatever process is interacting with it. We're now going to treat this zip file as the detection, so it never has a chance to even extract and be an actual executable. Okay, we've updated internal custom intelligence based on an active threat being observed within the environment. It's very important. This is our intelligence. We have trend intelligence, we have virus, we have all this external threat intelligence, but this is our internal intelligence. Okay. We also know that beta test virus here was actually came from a mail client here. It's called hxtsr.exe because of our lab, but just know that this is essentially Outlook here, right? So we know that Outlook was the originating process, and that on September 22nd at 8:52 a.m., the user opened up this zip file, and then they were like, that's interesting, and they pulled the actual threat out of it. Okay, so a couple things there. We know it came over email. We know what time it came in. We can talk to the user, and the user says, I didn't do anything, because the user never does anything. They never did anything wrong. This thing just popped up out of nowhere, right? But we have actionable intelligence here. We know what happened on this endpoint. We know that he was the user at that time. And so we can say, hey, Daryl, in this case, Daryl's a colleague of mine, but Daryl, in this case, hey, let's be careful about opening up attachments. Here's why maybe that wasn't the right call. And maybe do some additional phishing awareness campaign for this particular client, because, clearly there's a little bit of a gap there, right? But there's several different ways we can address that. All right, now this is all this endpoint data so far. So what about the email sensor data, right? We have Cloud App Security providing that as well. When I click on the email message here, I can see just that. Here's the person, or here's the sender that actually sent this file here. All right. Also, 3 other people received it. Interesting to know, right? There's attachments involved here. That's that beta test virus. And there's also URLs that are present as well. All this stuff is potentially intelligence here. Okay. And also, because Cloud App Security is configured with API, it's actually talking directly to Exchange Online. When I take this response action of quarantining this message, that's going to reach into Daryl's mailbox and pull that message out. I'm pulling that out of the message and ensuring that he's not able to click on it again. If other people receive the same message and I take that quarantine action, it's going to pull it out for them as well. We've identified the source of this, and we're able to quarantine it from the mailboxes to ensure this same event doesn't play out in the same way on another machine. And if it did, this zip file is now a part of my custom intelligence, right? And if this ICAR-COM had any sort of rapid proliferation or tunneling or network scanning capabilities, all that's blocked because I've been able to isolate it. There's several response actions that we've been able to take from this XDR. This is a very simple one. These are oftentimes a lot more complex. They have multiple processes happening. We're seeing it reaching out to a URL. That URL is a known phishing URL, right? And it's downloading stuff. And we see the dropper happen. We see all this communication happen. We have multiple IOCs to ensure we're upgrading defense. But this is kind of a simple one, a very simple, cut and dry. Zip file came in, they opened it up, and that led to a detection here. And we've been able to really address that across the board. Additionally, what I can do is, if I've identified this would be now an indicator of compromise, which is kind of today's vocabulary word, I guess. This would be an indicator of compromise, also known as an IOC. If this is present anywhere else on my network, then it may potentially be compromised, therefore, indicator of compromise. Okay? So we can take an IOC and we can actually do an investigation based on that. So I can grab this file hash here. Say, I want to do a threat investigation, and I want to see how prevalent this file hash is on other machines within the network. And that's going to tell me that's that. And then look, from there, I can generate a root cause analysis, which we talked about earlier. And that'll tell me how that machine interacted with that file hash. And then based on that, I might see some other intelligence, and then I might do another investigation. But you see how we have the alert, and then based on the elements that have been associated with that, we can now chase this threat around internally. We know all the little things that are related to it, the little tricks that they're using. We've identified that as suspicious objects. And really our response here is so much more sophisticated than if we had just let antivirus, identify this file and quarantine it. Okay, cool. It's still sitting in somebody else's mailbox. That sender still can obviously send us mail. What if the next attack is successful, right? We really need to identify all these different elements and respond more appropriately. Okay, and that is everything that I wanted to share with you guys today. I hope the value of XDR and what the purpose and strategy is with XDR, the psychology behind it is clear to you. I'm happy to answer any questions if you've got any, but I'll go ahead and pass it back to Doug.
All right, Brandon. Well, it was interesting to take a look at this and hear a little bit more about how XDR technology expands options and capabilities, and really can truly, show you the way as to how things get into your system. I know that Jonathan, our director of technology, he's one that's on a day-to-day basis taking a look at these things. So I'll let him see if maybe he has any comments or questions that we see on a daily basis pertaining to this. Jonathan?
No, I mean, overall, it's just a great extra layer to have in protection out there. As anything with security, the more layers you can have between you and the quote unquote bad guys out there, the better. So
Yes, sir.
It's been a great tool in that respect.
Yes, sir.
I know there's a lot of specifics that this can pertain to. I just find it absolutely fascinating that some people would be like, oh, this only affected Joe and it's no big deal. And then with this tool, you're actually able to see that there could be that potential of a bigger deal out there.
Right. Yeah, I think what's really interesting is this has always been around. XDR as a concept has been around for enterprises that have a SIM, and they have all these tools in place that's all reporting back, and they're all able to do correlation from there. But with XDR technology, it's now a lot more scalable. A lot more businesses can take advantage of it. And that's one of the coolest parts about it.
And hopefully getting you ahead for preventing it from next time that comes down the line.
Yep.
Well, I do not see any questions from our participants here today. Any final thoughts here before I wrap it up, Brandon?
No, just thank you so much for inviting me back, and I hope to see you guys again.
All right. Well, thank you to Brandon from Trend Micro for his expertise today. We do appreciate your time and learning more about better detection, better response, how XDR technology expands your options and capabilities when faced with a cyber attack. If you're a current client and you want to see how what you learned today pertains to your agreement, feel free to give us a call after the webinar. If you're wanting to learn more about LammTech and our offerings, you can also call me direct. Number is 660-851-7342. You can also email me, which you see on that page there, Doug@LammTech.com. Also, you see our general manager as well with his email at George@LammTech.com. Again, we do thank you for your time, and we hope you have a fantastic day, and we'll see you at our next webinar.